This is one of the most challenging things I've made yet. I thought the last project was pretty difficult, but this one was much more of a challenge. And what you see here are harpsichords from the colonial era. And mine is going to be a very simple version of this one. But I'm showing you others. This one is from the 16th century, late in the 16th century. A harpsichord is played by striking the key, and it doesn't have a hammer on it like a piano. It actually plucks the string with a thing called a plectra, and they're usually made out of quill or leather. So it's like playing the harp, only with keys. Harpsichords can be dated back to the 14th century, so it's coming from the medieval era. And here in the colonies, it was really a status symbol, and they showed up in the most unlikely places. So my log cabin is going to have a harpsichord, but it'll be a simpler version, kind of like I said, based on this style, but with a little bit more decoration. This would have been made here in the Americas, and even if you go to Williamsburg today, you can see a harpsichord maker there making harpsichords. The harpsichord reached its peak in the Baroque period, and then in about the early 1700s, the first form of a piano was invented by an Italian, and as that became more available, by the time you get to the Regency period, that's the preferred instrument, although there were plenty of harpsichords still around here in the colonies. I'm starting out with 1/8 inch thick balsa wood, and what I have here is actually a little jewelry box that I bought that's made out of pot metal and was painted gold, and it was in pretty bad shape, but it was a harpsichord, and it looks like it's 1/12 size, so I'm going to use this as a model to make the outside of my wooden harpsichord. And I'm just going to measure around, and I'm going to cut two of these. One will be the bottom, and the other one will be the lid that will close. And of course I have my film speeded up. This did take quite a while to make, and I had a lot of fails that I had to redo. And so the film is shortened quite a bit. This one will be the bottom, and it will be a little bit longer, but the curve is the same size. Because I'm including the keyboard on the bottom. And where I'm drawing that line right now is where the keyboard will go. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking veneer that came on a roll, and I cut it 1-inch strips. And I'm going to soak this in hot water. I don't show that. And I'm just going to glue these together with wood glue. And I'm going to use this pot metal harpsichord as a mold so that when the glue and the water dry, it will be the shape that I need. And I will cut some of it off too. I just put some wood glue on, and I'm just sticking it together. And I'm molding it around, and I did wet it, and I just put some clips on it to hold it. And when that dries, it'll be the right shape. Some of the harpsichords actually didn't have this curve. They would just make them a narrower box at the end. And some of them were just boxes as well. And this is going to be a side. And I will trim that one end that looks a little bit bigger as I go along. And I'll put a curve on the front. And I'll sand the edges so that it gets smooth. And that'll go where the keyboard will be placed. And I'll do 2 of those. I have to recut that one. It just came out a little too angular. And I'll just cut it short. It's on the short end. And I'm just going to measure that and cut it off, and that'll be a piece of scrap. And this is just the wood glue that I always use, which is my favorite glue. Just stick a few pins in there, and it'll straighten out later before the glue is completely dried. And I'll sand that down when the glue is dry. Now I'm going to put the front in front of the keyboard. Some of these harpsichords had double keyboards. This is just a single one. I don't worry about the glue because I'm going to paint this. I rarely use just pure stain on anything. Balsa wood takes stain and absorbs it very, very seriously, and you can get a very uneven coat because of that anyway. So now these are the legs, and I've just cut them short, and I'm just going to narrow them down at the foot. I ended up putting 4 legs on. Originally I was just going to put 3, but it was a little too unbalanced, so I did add a 4th. I'm just wiping away the excess glue. And I'll make sure these legs are straight before the glue is completely dry. And these are just pre-turned banister uprights that I had, and so that's what I'm using for legs. And I didn't include putting this on. I lost that piece of film. But what I did is I just took that curved piece that was dried and glued it on to the ends of the wood and pinned it in place. And then I'll sand it later when it's completely dry. So I just wanted you to see that. I had soaked it, molded it around that pot metal piece. I let it dry overnight, and then I just placed it right on along the curve of the bottom and glued it along the bottom and the sides. And I'm just going to bend it a little bit and put enough pins in it so that it stays in place, and then I'll sand it later. See, I kept dropping it, that's why I put the extra leg in. Even though in many of them it didn't have that extra leg. See, that's the wood that I used, and it's very bendable, so I just wanted to show you. But of course, if you wet it, it's much more easily handled and it won't crack. And that's going to be the top. Now I'm going to make a hinge with a piece of linen, and I'm going to cut it thin and glue a portion of it on. And I'm going to just use, actually the glue that I used for this is a bookbinding glue, which stays flexible, but adheres very well. And I'll list the bookbinding glue, I'll put it in the description, the link to where I got it. It's just a glue that I bought on Amazon and I've used quite a bit. in the past. I'm just going to sand around and so close up those seams. And you can see the shape. I used this same wood to make my spinning wheel a couple weeks back to make the wheel itself. I don't remember what kind of wood it is, but it isn't balsa wood for sure. I'll leave a link for that as well. And I'm just going to start painting, and I'm going to mix burnt sienna and raw umber and a little bit of wood glue into the paint and just give it the once over, and then I'll sand in between coats. You didn't see me add the wood glue. I cut that portion out, sorry. I mentioned this before, but the absolute zenith of popularity of the harpsichord came in the Baroque period, which is in the 1600s, 17th century. And then in 1700, an Italian named Bartolomeo Cristofori invented what would become the piano later. It was called the Gravice Ballo col piano a forte. And right at 1700, and he worked for the Medici family, but it didn't make it to the Americas for, a long time. And it was a very expensive instrument. But by the time the Regency period came in the very beginning of the 19th century, it became more popular. And the harpsichord was considered very old-fashioned by then. Now I'm just going to paint around these edges. And you see the hinge I've made with the linen. This is the image I'm going to use. It's not copyrighted. It is from the early 1700s, and it's a painting, an English painting. And I'm going to cut this out, and I will glue that on. You won't see me do it. I just put bookbinding glue on the wood and put it on. So I didn't include it in the film. It's just very easy to do. First I'm going to do that, and then I will glue the lid on. And I'm just turning up that little corner. I'll put a little bit of beaded glue on there. And I'm just going to glue that on. I'm going to smooth that out a little bit more with a bookbinding tool. Make sure there's no wrinkles in it. Smooth it on where I put the glue. I had bent it over so that it will bend back and forth. Just tuck it in. And I'm just going to pin it together so that it'll dry. I know it looks a little messy, but it'll be all right. I'm just going to wipe the edges off with my finger. And now for the keyboard. I sprayed both that painting and the keyboard with a spray enamel right onto the paper and let it dry so that the moisture from the glues wouldn't smear the inkjet paint or color. That's the wood binding, the bookbinding glue right there, wood binding. I'm just going to smooth that out. And you can buy that on Amazon. And as I said, it stays flexible. It's very sticky. Now this is going to go inside the piano. I'm going to paint it first. I drew that line because the pins for the strings will go on or next to this that will hold the pins. And I'm literally going to just use pins and push them through. These are just straight pins, and I'm going to push them all the way, not all the way through, but probably leave about 1/8 of an inch, and then I'll cut the heads off. I'll try to get them as evenly spaced as possible, but it's a little tricky. I did mark it, but it is hard to see, but because I painted over it, but you can still see the line. Now this, of course, won't have as many strings on it as a real one. There just isn't going to be room, and I didn't want to use real, string. I experimented with it, and it just didn't work. It got so fiddly that I said, well, I'm just going to use wire. So I did. And again, I'll cut the heads off of these. And I'll also shorten it. At the bottom, I'll cut the pins so that they're all the same length, because it has to fit inside. And this will all get painted again too. And these are just supports I'm going to put on the back. I'm going to use that balsa wood that's 1/4 inch thick. I'll just cut a couple of pieces. You won't see it, so they don't have to be the same size. It'll just keep it up. And just pull those. I already cut the bottoms of the pins off. I didn't think it was necessary to show that, so I'm just going to glue these supports on. Just cut this one a little shorter, and they'll lay flat. And that's just a piece of trim for the front of the piano, and that's a little piece of hardwood. It has a little bit of a decorative curve to it, and I'll let that dry. I'll give it a couple of coats, and then I'll glue that on later. This goes right inside, and I'll glue that down. I'm just trying to figure which way it goes. That's the right way. I still have to cut the heads off, though. I just want to make sure it fits. And I'm just going to cut them all off, pull them up, and make sure they're even. And I'll glue it in. There's the glue. Try to get that even. Wipe off the excess. And now I'm going to cut a piece that goes under the wires. And I looked at a lot of the insides of these harpsichords, and I'm patterning this one off of one that I saw that was from the early 18th century rather. And it didn't have any decorations on the inside or on the board that held the wires, the harp wires. And that's going to go in there too. And I'll paint that. That's got to be leveled out. I'll have to put some supports in it. And these are the supports. I'll just put one on each end. Underneath that would have been the quills or the leather that is used to pluck the strings when you push the key. Of course, I'm not going to put all that sort of thing in. I wouldn't be able to, even if I wanted to. But it wouldn't be seen anyway, so. Okay, I'm going to glue this in and then I'll paint it. There we go. I accidentally wiped the glue off. And that will fit right there. Okay. And this is the wire I'm going to use. And I'm just trying it to see if it fits. I'm going to paint it silver. And then I'm also going to paint over it again with a little bit of glaze to calm it down. I had to take that out because it needs supports too. I just realized it has to come up higher. So I'll cut off maybe 5 or 6 of these pieces of wood, and it has to be raised up. So I'm going to do that quickly. Make sure they're the same size. I lost one. and glue those on the bottom of that S-shaped thing. And that holds the wires in place. Some of these would have a soundboard over the wires too, with holes that were decorative that were cut into it, but this one won't have that. And I'll just put glue on the bottom of each one. So I'll have to let it dry for a few minutes. And I let it dry, and I'm just going to glue that in. And that will get painted as well. My dog is walking around making noise, sorry. He sees some kind of animal outside and he keeps pacing back and forth between windows. And this is another support. I'm just going to trim it down. And that will go behind the other one. And it'll be raised a little bit. There. Let those dry and I'll give those some paint. And I'm just going to pin this thing in so that it stays because it doesn't want to stay. So I'll just pin it in place till it's dried. I'm just pulling up the little pins here and there, make sure they're even. And now I'm going to paint this. Just give it a quick coat, and I'll have to give it 2 coats anyway, so I'm just giving it an initial coat. Even though it's not completely, the glue's not all dry, it doesn't really matter. It's dry enough. I had to be really careful I didn't get paint on the painting. I'm just sanding around the edge, make sure the paper is evenly cut off, and I'm just using an emery board, and then I'll paint the edge of that. And I'm actually coating this with golden matte glaze, and so the picture will be able to be seen. I didn't want any shine on it, so this is matte glaze. I'll put some on the keyboard too. And on the keyboard, I actually went around and cut into between each key so they looked slightly raised up. But you can't see that here. Okay, and this is I'm trying to decide where to put this to hold it up. And it doesn't go there, actually, it goes on the other side. I'm just going to give it 1 coat of paint first. I'll let it dry and give it another coat later. Okay, and now I'm placing the wires in and cutting them. I'm just going to skip around here so that you don't have to see me put each one in. It was kind of a painful experience. And I'm gluing these in with Ultra Control super glue. Okay, those are all in, and I'm going to put that bar on there above it. And then those will get painted a little bit later, just to calm them down so they're not quite so bright. And I'm going to put the brace that holds the top open. And since I'm never going to close it, I'm just going to leave it. And now the only decoration I'm going to put on it is 1 gold line around the whole thing. and around the side. And now the other S has to go in. I cut another one, a bigger one, and that will go on top. I don't know what the technical name is for this. Now I'm going to make the music holder real quick because it has to have one. I just made a quick template, just cutting around. And this is 1/16 inch balsa wood. So it's pretty thin stuff. I'm just going to sand around, take off some sharp edges, and make sure there's nothing frayed around the edges of it. That side's a little too long, so just cut it down, make sure it fits. I just made this up, just looking at the other ones. And I'm going to cut out the centers here. Birds are having some kind of a fight out there. I don't know if it'll pick it up in the recording. I have a bird feeder just right outside the window, and they seem to be squabbling over the seeds. I just put food out there before I started this editing process, so I don't know. They'll calm down and fly away soon. And I'm just going to glue this on the stand, and I'm also going to put a little bit of paint on this with some glue in it to stiffen it up so it doesn't break after I sand it. Okay, I did that, turned it kind of a brown color, and glued it on a little piece of wood that I cut on a slant on each end, as you can see there. And I'll have to sand that as well. Okay, just put that bigger piece in and glued it. I've got to glue it. I have to cut a piece off the end to make sure it fits. And I'm just putting super glue right on the wires and just gluing it to it. And I'm going to put a piece of 1/16 inch balsa wood square dowel above the keys because there was a space there, and it's a little decorative too, and I'll paint that later. Okay. I did put the piece on the front below the keys. I don't think I included that in the film, but it's just a piece of wood that I trimmed that I painted. I'm going to sand this, and then I'll paint it after I put the little metal holder in the back of it, which I'll trim off and glue. Okay, I painted that, and I'm going to paint this little piece of trim. There. It's almost done. I just have to glue the music holder on. I can't remember what the real name is. There it is. I don't have any music for it yet. I have to find some that will print off. I ended up putting 4 legs instead of 3. And there's the painting. And it's finished. But now I'm going to make a bench. And this is 1/8 inch balsa wood again. And I have 4 of those little rails for a fence rail or a stair rail. And I just cut them shorter. I just want to make sure she fits. And I'm using the fabric that I made for the doll that I made previously. I'm using the rest of it, or almost all of it, to cover the bench. So this, I just glued the legs on and I'm just painting it. So that was very simple. And I have some wool here, and I'm just going to glue that on top as a cushion, a little bit of a cushiony area. And I hardly ever use hot glue, but I'm going to use a little hot glue for this. And I'll cut this piece off. It's silk, hand-painted silk. I'll just glue the wool right to the seat. Just kind of push it around. I'm going to glue the fabric onto with some hot glue, and then I'll finish it with super glue. So I'll glue that fabric on, just fold it around the edges. Cut off the excess. I folded it and just put a spot of glue on it. And this little piece of ribbon came off of a Dove Valentine's Day box that I got at Valentine's Day with chocolates in it. And I just loved this little piece of ribbon, so I kept it, and I thought, well, I'm going to use it, and so now I'm using it. And I'm going to trim around the seat with it. And I'm using hot glue here. Covering up the rough edges. Try to get it straight. I'm sorry if this is a little fast, but really I don't want these films to be too long. So, okay, now I'm going to put some chenille, velvet chenille yarn around it, and I'm gluing that with super glue, just to make it a little more finished. There. And I just push that in and trim it off later. Looks like I've got to trim it now. There, that's better. Okay. Now the seat's done, except for I'm going to put some pins in the cushions to make them look like buttons to push the cushion down a little bit. And I'm actually using very, very fine pins. These have little brown heads on them. And I'm just going to push it all the way through and cut it off at the bottom. And I'll put some super glue too, so they can't just pop back up. Now it's all done. And I'm going to put this in the sitting room of my log home where the fireplace is. And here's a little setup to kind of give you an idea. No fireplace though. And let you look at it at another angle. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you will like and subscribe. This was a fun project, although it was very difficult. I didn't include all my mistakes. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.